56,000 people control more wealth than the bottom 2.8 billion combined. Half of the world owns just 2% of global wealth. The top 10% holds roughly 3/4 of everything. Those numbers aren't projections. They're not warnings. They're already true. And when you see figures this extreme, this clean, this consistent across the planet, one conclusion becomes unavoidable. Outcomes like this don't happen by accident. Because this isn't confined to one country, one ideology, or one economic model. Different governments, different cultures, different histories. Same curve. Wealth rushing upward, pooling at the top, while the rest of the world stretches thinner beneath it. That's the part that should stop you. If inequality were random, it would look chaotic. If it were accidental, it would correct itself somewhere. Instead, it repeats. Zoom out over the last 30 years and you'll hear a familiar claim. The world is becoming more equal. And on one narrow metric, that's true. The gap between countries has narrowed, driven largely by growth in emerging economies like China and India. More than 1 billion people escaped extreme poverty. That story gets told often, and it deserves its place. But zoom in just one level deeper, and the picture flips. Within countries, inequality has surged. Quietly, relentlessly. Across rich nations and poor ones alike, the distance between the top and everyone else widened, even as total wealth exploded. In the United States, the top 1% income share more than doubled over the last 4 decades. By the mid-2020s, global wealth concentration had returned to levels last seen in the early 20th century, an era built on extraction and concentration. Different century, same shape. And the engine behind that shape isn't income, it's wealth. Income tells you what you earn this year. Wealth tells you what grows when you do nothing. Assets don't need permission to multiply. They compound, they appreciate, they survive downturns, and increasingly, they are held by fewer and fewer people. Today, the top 10% owns about 75 to 76% of all global wealth. The bottom 50% of humanity, billions of adults, shares just 2%. And at the absolute peak sits a sliver so small it barely feels real. The top 0.001%, roughly 56,000 individuals. A football stadium's worth of people holding 3 times more wealth than nearly half the planet combined. That's not a system failing, that's a system optimized. Since the 1990s, billionaire wealth has grown at roughly 8% a year, nearly double the growth rate of the bottom half of the global population. By 2026, the world counted around 3,000 billionaires, with a combined net worth of $18.3 trillion. More wealth than most countries produce in an entire year. And this concentration doesn't respect borders. In the Middle East and North Africa, the most unequal region globally, the top 10% captures nearly 58% of all national income. In South Africa, consistently ranked the most unequal country on earth, the top 10% owns about 85% of personal wealth. The bottom 50% doesn't just own less, it owns less than nothing. Its debt exceeded its assets. Europe stands as a partial exception, not because Europeans are inherently different, but because of deliberate policy choices, public investment, redistribution, safety nets that absorb shocks instead of amplifying them. Even there, inequality exists. It's just constrained rather than unleashed, which leads to an uncomfortable truth. Where you're born remains the strongest predictor of your economic future. The birthplace lottery beats talent, effort, and ambition more often than we'd like to admit. And even within the same country, the starting line keeps drifting farther apart. For decades, the middle class was supposed to be the stabilizer, the proof that growth worked. Instead, the global middle 40% became the pressure point. Too comfortable to qualify for help, too exposed to benefit from asset booms. In the United States, the middle class wealth has steadily eroded. Its share of total wealth fell from about 34% in 1980 to around 28% today. Over the same period, debt exploded. Education, housing, healthcare, once ladders, turned into leverage. Progress didn't disappear, it got financed. Globally, the pattern repeats. The poorest saw modest gains, the ultra-rich saw explosive ones. The middle stagnated, stretched thinner with every cycle. Not crushed outright, just slowly squeezed. And then stress hits. Financial crisis, pandemics, climate shocks. These moments are often described as resets. They're not. They're stress tests. And every time the system is stressed, it reveals who it's built to protect. Losses at the top are often temporary, cushioned by assets, influence, and policy response. Losses at the bottom are permanent. Jobs vanish, homes disappear, credit dries up. Recovery becomes a theory. Risk isn't shared evenly. Reward certainly isn't. This isn't about individual greed or personal failure. It's about design. Over the last 40 years, deregulation, tax structures, and so-called trickle-down policies reshaped incentives. According to researchers at the World Inequality Lab, rising inequality isn't inevitable. It's the result of political choice. What gets taxed? What gets protected? What gets exposed? Systems reward what they value. Capital is shielded. Labor is flexible. Assets recover faster than people. And the system runs on belief. The belief that outcomes are earned, that success proves merit, and that failure proves fault. That story keeps people running an inside game whose rules quietly change. Technology accelerates everything. Artificial intelligence promises enormous productivity gains, but productivity doesn't automatically translate into shared prosperity. By 2040, AI is projected to threaten up to 60% of jobs in developed countries. Not eliminate work entirely, but polarize it. High-skill, high-capital roles multiply rewards. Everyone else competes for shrinking ground. Climate change adds another layer. Those who emit the least bear the heaviest cost. Floods, heat, food instability. Losses that don't show up on balance sheets until it's too late. Meanwhile, those with capital hedge, relocate, insure, adapt. Shock gets absorbed at the top and transferred downward. If this were an accident, it wouldn't align so cleanly across crises. If it were a glitch, it would have corrected itself by now. Instead, advantages compound. Entry points narrow, second chances shrink. Wealth becomes less about income and more about access. Access to assets, to information, to protection. And that's the moment the pattern snaps into focus. The wealth gap didn't widen because people suddenly became lazier or smarter. It widened because incentives changed, protection shifted, and power consolidated. Across borders, ideologies, and decades, the outcome repeats because the design holds. Systems don't drift into inequality by mistake. They produce it when accumulation is rewarded more than contribution, when losses are socialized downward and gains concentrated upward. Once that structure locks in, it doesn't self-correct. It stabilizes. That's why the gap keeps getting worse. Compounding doesn't pause. Locked-in advantages don't dissolve. Each cycle builds on the last, making escape harder the longer it runs. So the real question isn't why some people fall behind. It's why a system that produces this outcome everywhere is still described as fair. Because when you strip away the myths, the anecdotes, and the comforting stories, what's left is simple. The wealth gap isn't an accident, it's a feature. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. If this shook the way you think about money and control, like and subscribe. And if you're ready to see what comes next in this global game, click the video on your screen.